They captured the Apache woman to kill her. What the cowboy did instead shocked the frontier. The rough hemp rope scraped against Maria's throat as they dragged her forward through the clearing. She stumbled, her knees hitting packed earth still warm from the day's sun, though night had fallen hard and fast. Orange firelight danced across a dozen faces twisted with rage, settlers, ranch hands, men who'd ridden from town with whiskey courage and mob justice burning in their chests. Behind her, the remains of her village sent black smoke curling into the starless sky. The acrid smell of burning hides and timber mixed with gunpowder and her own blood. She understood enough English to know what they intended. A rope. A tree. Frontier justice for crimes she'd never committed. Her wrists burned where the bindings cut deep. Pain shot through her ribs where someone's boot had found purchase during the capture. But she refused to cry out. She'd learned years ago that showing pain only fed men like these, gave them permission to inflict more. So she lifted her chin, jaw set, and met their hatred with stone-faced silence. That defiance seemed to enrage them further. "String her up," someone shouted from the back. "Apache bitch killed Tommy Garrison." "Make it slow," another voice added, thick with drink and venom. Maria's pulse hammered against her temples. She hadn't killed anyone. She'd been gathering medicine plants near the creek when the soldiers came, when the shooting started, when her world caught fire. But truth meant nothing here. These men saw only her beaded dress, her long dark hair, her brown skin, and that was enough to convict her of every crime ever committed on this blood-soaked frontier. The foreman, a thick-necked man named Thornton, stepped forward with the noose. His eyes gleamed with something uglier than simple vengeance, satisfaction. He wanted this. Needed it. Maria could smell the whiskey on his breath as he reached for her. Then a voice cut through the chaos, low, steady, utterly calm in a way that made every head turn. "That's enough." The crowd shifted, confused by the interruption. A man stepped forward from the shadows beyond the firelight, his silhouette tall and broad-shouldered against the darkness. His hand rested on his holstered revolver, casual but deliberate. His weathered face remained unreadable beneath the brim of his black hat, but his eyes, Maria could see them now as he entered the light, carried a weight that made even Thornton pause. It was Brent Moyer, one of their own. A cowboy who'd ridden with some of these men, who'd worked the same ranges, drunk in the same saloons. He'd been checking his horse's shoe near the tree line when they'd brought Maria in. He'd watched the scene unfold with growing unease, a sick feeling spreading through his gut as he recognized what was about to happen. He'd seen frontier justice before, had even looked away from it, to his shame. But something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was the woman's defiant silence, the way she refused to beg. Maybe it was the eager gleam in Thornton's eyes. Or maybe Brent was just tired of being the kind of man who looked away. Whatever the reason, he found himself walking forward when every instinct told him to mount up and ride out. "The hell you doing, Moyer?" Thornton growled, his grip tightening on the rope. The crowd murmured, uncertain now, sensing conflict among their own ranks. Brent's voice stayed level, but something hard as iron ran beneath it. Said that's enough. She gets a trial, not a lynching. Trial? Thornton spat the word like poison. You gone soft. This Apache whore killed a white man. You don't know that. Brent took another step closer, his hand still resting on his weapon. Not threatening, but present. You got evidence, or just convenient hate? The crowd shifted uneasily. Some nodded, caught up in the righteousness of their cause. Others looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. Maria watched this strange cowboy with narrowed eyes, her mind racing. She wanted to believe his intervention meant salvation, but she'd learned better. White men who seemed kind at first had proven cruelest in the end. This had to be a trick, another form of torture, give her hope, then snatch it away. Thornton's face flushed red with fury and humiliation. You calling me a liar, Moyer? I'm saying you're drunk and wrong, and I won't stand witness to murder. Brent's tone hardened. Take her to Fort Defiance. Let the law sort it. If she's guilty, she'll hang legal. But not here. Not tonight. For a long moment, the clearing held its breath. Firelight crackled. Somewhere in the darkness, a horse stamped nervously. Maria could feel the mob's bloodlust warring with uncertainty. They'd come for easy vengeance, not a fight with one of their own. Then Thornton made his choice. Like hell. He yanked on the rope, dragging Maria toward the tree. Brent's revolver cleared leather before anyone could blink. The metallic click of the hammer cocking back froze the entire crowd. Let her go, Jacob. Last time I'm asking. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Maria felt the world narrow to this single moment, this cowboy she didn't know, couldn't trust, pointing a gun at his own kind for reasons she couldn't fathom. Thornton's hand trembled on the rope, his face a mask of rage and calculation. If he pushed, blood would spill. If he backed down, he'd lose face in front of everyone. Brent made the decision for him. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Maria's arm, not roughly, but firmly, and cut her bindings with a knife from his belt. The rope fell away, and suddenly she was standing, free but surrounded, her fate balanced on the edge of this stranger's recklessness. She's my responsibility now, Brent announced to the crowd. Anyone wants to argue can do it through me. Then, before the shock could wear off, before Thornton could rally his men, Brent pulled Maria toward his horse, mounted up, and hauled her up behind him. The crowd erupted in shouts, but by then his heels were already digging into the horse's flanks. They exploded out of the clearing into the darkness beyond, leaving chaos and confusion in their wake. Maria clung to this stranger's back as the horse thundered through the night, branches whipping past, the angry shouts fading behind them. Her mind reeled with questions, disbelief, and the terrible, fragile possibility that maybe, just maybe, she might survive this night after all. But even as they rode, even as distance grew between them and the mob, one question burned hotter than all the others. Why? Why would this cowboy risk everything, his reputation, his safety, maybe his life, for an Apache woman he didn't know? Men didn't do such things. Not in her experience. Not in this world built on conquest and cruelty. Which meant either he was the first honest man she'd ever met, or he was something far more dangerous, a captor in disguise, leading her from one nightmare into another. The forest closed around them, dark and vast and unforgiving. Behind them, she could hear the mob organizing, mounting up, beginning their pursuit. The cowboy urged the horse faster, his body tense with purpose. Maria's hands gripped his shirt, her injured ribs screaming with every jarring stride, but she didn't let go. She couldn't. For better or worse, her survival was now tied to this stranger's choice. She just didn't know yet if that choice would save her or destroy her. Thanking you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's begin. The horse's breath came in ragged gasps as they plunged deeper into the darkness. Maria felt every thundering hoof beat through her broken ribs, each jolt a fresh knife of pain. Behind them, the shouts had organized into something worse, the methodical sound of pursuit. Torch lights bobbed through the trees like hunting wolves closing in. Brent leaned forward, urging the horse up a steep embankment. "Hold on," he muttered, the first words he'd spoken since they'd fled. Maria's fingers dug into his shirt, her mind still reeling. This made no sense. Men didn't throw away their lives for strangers, especially not for Apache women marked for death. Yet here she was, clinging to one who had. The terrain grew treacherous as they climbed. Loose shale scattered under the horse's hooves, and the animal stumbled, nearly throwing them both. Brent cursed under his breath and pulled hard on the reins, guiding them into a narrow ravine where moonlight barely penetrated. He dismounted first, then offered his hand to Maria. She ignored it, sliding down herself despite the scream of protest from her ribs. He didn't push, just gathered the reins and led the horse deeper into the canyon. The walls rose steep on either side, bare rock that seemed to swallow sound. Brent stopped where the passage narrowed to barely shoulder width. "Can't take him further," he said, his voice low and grim. He pulled his rifle and saddlebag from the horse, then did something that stunned Maria. He slapped the animal's hindquarters, sending it back the way they'd come. "Go on. Git." The horse disappeared into the darkness, hoof beats echoing, then fading. Maria stared at Brent, comprehension dawning cold and heavy. He'd just eliminated their only means of escape. They were on foot now in hostile territory with armed men hunting them. "They'll follow the horse," Brent explained, reading her expression. "Buy us time." He slung the rifle over his shoulder and started walking deeper into the canyon. After a moment's hesitation, Maria followed. What choice did she have? Her ankle twisted on loose rock, and she bit back a gasp. Brent stopped, glanced back, but kept his distance. "It's rough going. Holler if you need to rest." She wouldn't. Wouldn't show weakness, wouldn't give him ammunition. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the canyon walls pressing close, the sound of distant voices occasionally drifting on the wind. Maria's body screamed, her ribs, her wrists raw from the rope, exhaustion pulling at every step. But she kept moving, kept pace with this stranger who'd made himself an outlaw for reasons she still couldn't fathom. Finally, Brent stopped in a wider section where a dead cottonwood provided some cover. He set down his pack, pulled out a canteen, and held it toward her. Maria's throat burned with thirst, but she hesitated. He waited, arm extended, patient. When she finally took it, his hand retreated immediately, giving her space. She drank, the water cool and clean, then wiped her mouth and handed it back. Brent took a swallow himself, then reached into his belt. Maria tensed, ready to fight or run despite her exhaustion. But what he pulled free wasn't a weapon pointed at her, it was a knife, blade gleaming in the thin moonlight. He held it out, handle first. "You're not my prisoner," Brent said quietly, his eyes meeting hers in the darkness. "You want to run, run. You want to fight, fight. But if you're staying, you'll need this." Maria stared at the offered blade, her mind fracturing with disbelief and suspicion in something she didn't want to name. In the distance, the sound of horses grew fainter, following the wrong trail. And here stood this cowboy, offering her both freedom and a weapon, his face weathered and unreadable but his hands steady. She took the knife. Their fingers didn't touch. And for the first time since the flames had consumed her village, Maria allowed herself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, not all white men were the same. Dawn broke gray and cold over the canyon rim. Maria moved through the rocks like a shadow, the knife Brent had given her tucked against her palm. She watched him navigate the narrow deer trail ahead, his movements efficient and sure-footed despite the treacherous slope. He read the land the way her people did, not conquering it, but moving with it. The smoke smell still clung to her hair, her clothes. She couldn't escape it. Every breath brought back the memory of 3 days ago when the soldiers had come at first light, when her world had caught fire. She'd been gathering yerba mansa by the creek, the healing plant her mother needed for old wounds that never quite healed. The first gunshot had echoed through the canyon like thunder, followed by screams. By the time Maria reached the village, flames already consumed half the wickiups. She'd searched frantically for her mother through the chaos, women running, children crying, men trying to mount defense against impossible odds. Then the second wave had arrived. Not soldiers this time, but settlers. Ranch hands. The garrison outfit, faces Maria recognized from the trading post. They'd ridden in with fury and purpose, shooting anything that moved. She'd seen Tommy Garrison at the front, his rifle raised, his young face twisted with hate that mirrored his father's. Then she'd seen him fall, shot by one of her own people defending their homes. After that, everything blurred. Maria had grabbed a child, her cousin's daughter, and run for the rocks. Behind her, the screams. The smoke. The sound of a people being erased. By the time she'd gotten the child to safety with other survivors fleeing south, her mother had vanished. Gone. Maybe escaped, maybe taken, maybe dead. Maria had stayed behind to search, to find answers, while her people scattered like leaves before a storm. 3 days of searching had led to her capture. The mob hadn't cared that she'd been gathering plants when Tommy died. They'd seen an Apache woman, alone and vulnerable, and their grief had found its target. Step careful here. Brent's voice pulled her back to the present. He'd stopped where the trail narrowed to a ledge barely wide enough for one person, a sheer drop to the left. Rocks loose. Follow exactly where I step. Maria studied his path, memorizing each footfall. He moved across first, then waited on the far side, not offering help but watching to ensure she made it. She pressed herself against the canyon wall and inched across, refusing to look down. When she reached solid ground, their eyes met briefly. Something passed between them, acknowledgement, maybe. Grudging respect. They continued in silence, descending into a valley thick with juniper and sage. Brent paused occasionally to check their back trail, his eyes scanning the ridgeline for pursuit. His vigilance was constant but not paranoid. He knew this country, understood how hunters thought. Maria recognized the skill because she possessed it too. "Water ahead," Brent said, pointing to where the land dipped into a dry wash. "Spring feeds a pool about a mile down. We'll rest there, refill the canteen." Maria nodded but kept the knife ready. She'd watched him through the night, waiting for the mask to slip, for his true intentions to surface. Men who helped always wanted something. But Brent had simply kept watch while she'd slept fitfully against the rocks, never approaching, never crowding her space. As they walked, she found herself studying him differently. The way he moved through the wilderness with quiet competence. The way he'd sacrificed his horse to save them both. The way he'd given her a weapon when he could have kept her helpless. The smoke smell faded as they descended, replaced by the clean scent of sage. But the ghosts remained, her mother's face, the burning village, Tommy Garrison falling. And underneath it all, the terrible question, if this cowboy was truly different, if his mercy was genuine, what did that mean about everything she believed about his people? The answer frightened her more than any knife or rope ever could. The blue uniforms appeared through the cottonwoods without warning. For cavalry soldiers watering their horses at the spring, their lieutenants scanning the trail with the practiced eye of a man who'd spent years hunting people through these territories. Maria's hand went instinctively to the knife at her belt, but Brent's fingers closed gently around her wrist, not restraining, just cautioning. "Easy," he breathed. "Let me handle this." Before she could protest, he straightened and called out in an easy drawl that sounded nothing like the tense man she traveled with. "Afternoon, Lieutenant. Didn't expect to see Army this far west." The officer's hand moved to his sidearm as his eyes swept over them, a cowboy and a woman with dark skin and long black hair. Maria felt the assessment, the calculation. Then Brent did something that made her blood freeze. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close against his side. "Name's Brent Moyer. This is my wife, Maria. We're headed to Fort Defiance, her aunt's taken ill." The lie came smooth as silk, but Maria felt the tension coiled in Brent's body. The lieutenant's gaze lingered on her face, her beaded dress visible beneath the blanket Brent had draped over her shoulders earlier. "Your wife, you say?" "Yes, sir. Married 2 years now." Brent's arm tightened fractionally, a warning for Maria to stay calm. "No, she don't look like the wives you're used to seeing, but love don't ask permission from census takers." One of the soldiers snickered, but the lieutenant's expression remained skeptical. "There was a raid 3 days back. Apache village. Some escaped. You see anyone suspicious on the trail?" Maria's heart hammered so hard she was certain they could hear it. But Brent's voice stayed steady. "Just a couple prospectors heading towards Silver City. Trail's been quiet otherwise." The lieutenant studied them a long moment, then seemed to reach a decision. "Fort Defiance is 2 days northeast. Stay on the main trail, safer that way." "And Moyer?" His eyes hardened. "If I find out you're lying to me about anything, I'll see you both hang for it." "Wouldn't dream of it, sir." They stood frozen until the patrol mounted up and disappeared back toward the south. Only then did Brent's arm drop away, his breath releasing in a shaky exhale. Christ! That was close. Maria stepped back, putting distance between them, her skin still burning where he'd touched her. "Your wife." The words came sharp with accusation. Only thing I could think of that made sense. Apache woman traveling with a white man. He met her eyes, his expression grim. They'd have taken you in chains. This way, you're protected. At least on paper. She wanted to rage at him for the presumption, for claiming ownership even as a lie. But the terrible truth was he'd saved her again. The cavalry would have recognized her, would have connected her to the raid. The lie had given her cover she desperately needed. That night they made cold camp in a rocky overhang, no fire to give away their position. Maria sat as far from Brent as the small space allowed, the knife within easy reach. But as darkness fell, she noticed something. He positioned himself between her and the trail, not trapping her, but shielding her from anyone who might approach. When he finally slept, it came fitfully. Twice she watched him jerk awake, his hand reaching for his rifle, his eyes searching the darkness with the haunted look of a man who'd seen too much. In those moments, she glimpsed something beneath the weathered cowboy exterior, a man carrying his own ghosts, his own regrets. A man who slept light because he knew the world's cruelty intimately. At dawn, she found he'd given her the better blanket, leaving himself with only his coat. Small gestures of care that cost him comfort. The kind of honor that couldn't be faked. Maria didn't thank him. But when they resumed their journey and he unconsciously moved to walk between her and the main trail, she didn't object. The lie that protected her was becoming something more complicated, a fiction that revealed uncomfortable truths about trust, about survival, about the man who'd chosen mercy when the world demanded blood. Maria smelled the tobacco before she saw the man. They'd made camp in a shallow arroyo, believing themselves alone, when the scent drifted down from the rimrock above. Brent's hand moved to his rifle, but a voice called out before he could raise it. "Easy now, Moyer. I'm coming down peaceable." The man who descended into the firelight moved with the fluid grace of a predator. Tall and lean, dressed in dark leather, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the cold calculation in his pale eyes. A long rifle rested casually across his shoulders, and twin revolvers hung at his hips. Maria recognized the type, a hunter of men. "Name's Cyrus Hale," he said, settling himself on a rock across the fire without invitation. "Mind if I warm myself? Gets cold in these hills at night." Brent remained standing, his body angled between Hale and Maria. "I know who you are. What do you want?" "Just to talk business." Hale's smile didn't reach his eyes. "See, there's a reward out for an Apache woman. Escaped from justice, they say. Killed a rancher's son." He paused to light a thin cigar, the flame illuminating his face in sharp relief. "Funny thing, description matches your wife pretty close." The silence stretched taut. Maria's hand found the knife, her muscles coiled to run or fight. But Brent didn't move, didn't flinch. "My wife's name is Maria Moyer. She's done nothing wrong." "That so?" Hale exhaled smoke, his gaze shifting to Maria with the detached interest of a man appraising livestock. "Because I heard tell Thornton's offering $500 for her return. Dead or alive." He let that sink in. "Now, I'm a reasonable man. I figure you got attached, maybe didn't know what you were getting into. So here's what I propose, you walk away, I collect the reward, and we both go our separate ways. Nobody needs to know you helped her." Brent's voice came flat and hard. She's not for sale. Now don't be hasty. Hale leaned forward, his tone reasonable, almost friendly. 500's good money. Split it with you even, $250 each. That's more than most men see in a year. You could start fresh somewhere, forget this whole mess. I said no. Hale's smile faded. His eyes went cold as winter stone. You're making a mistake, Moyer. Thornton's coming. So's the law. So's every bounty hunter between here and the territories who hears about that reward. You can't run forever. Don't need forever. Just need tonight. Brent's hand shifted almost imperceptibly toward his holster. And you're going to leave now, Hale. While you still can. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackling fire. Then Hale stood, his movements deliberate and slow. I'm going. But not because of your threats. He looked past Brent to Maria. I'm going because I'm curious. Want to see how this plays out, if your cowboy's conscience is strong enough to get you both killed. He disappeared into the darkness as quietly as he'd come, leaving only the smell of tobacco and threat hanging in the air. Brent didn't relax until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance. Then he sank down, his hands shaking slightly as he checked his rifle. Maria stared at him across the dying fire, her mind reeling. $500, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You could have. I know what I could have done. Then why? The question tore out of her, raw and desperate. Why throw away your life for someone you don't even know? Why risk everything for me? Brent looked up, his weathered face illuminated by the embers. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of something fundamental, something immovable. Because it's wrong. That mob, that bounty, the hate that drives it, all of it's wrong. He held her gaze, unflinching. That's all the reason a man should need. The simplicity of it shattered something inside Maria's chest. Not elaborate justification, not noble speeches about justice or redemption. Just the stark, terrible honesty of a man who'd chosen his conscience over his survival. She'd spent days waiting for his true motives to surface, for the mask to slip. But this was the truth beneath everything. He'd saved her because letting her die would have been wrong. And somehow, that was the most frightening answer of all. The fever came on the second day after Hale's visit. Maria had felt the wrongness building, the ache in her skull, the way the world seemed to tilt and shimmer. Then, scrambling down a steep ravine to avoid riders on the ridge above, her foot caught between rocks. She fell hard, her shoulder striking stone with a sickening crack. Brent was beside her instantly, his hands checking for brakes with practiced efficiency. Can you move it? She tried. White-hot agony shot through her shoulder and down her arm. The world grayed at the edges. When she came back to herself, Brent had her draped across his shoulders, carrying her through the scrub like she weighed nothing. His breath came hard but steady. There's a place, he muttered, more to himself than her. Old couple, good people. Not far. The homestead appeared through Maria's fever haze like a mirage, a small adobe house with a vegetable garden and chickens scratching in the dirt. An elderly Mexican man emerged, his weathered face breaking into recognition when he saw Brent. Then his eyes found Maria, and his expression shifted to concern. Dios mío. Bring her inside, quickly. The woman who met them at the door had silver hair braided down her back and hands that moved with gentle authority. She spoke rapid Spanish, her voice soothing as she guided Brent to lay Maria on a clean bed. ¿Qué pasó? She fell. Shoulders out of place, maybe broken. And fever. The woman, Elena, Maria would later learn, pressed cool fingers to Maria's forehead and said, "Infection, maybe. Or shock. We'll tend to her." She looked at Brent with eyes that had seen much and judged little. "You've brought trouble to our door, hijo." "I know. I'm sorry, Elena. But I had nowhere else." "Shoo. I didn't say you were wrong to come." She shooed him out with a wave. "Go. Speak with Roberto. Let me work." Maria drifted in and out as Elena stripped away her torn dress, washing dried blood and dirt from her skin with warm water and herbs. The woman spoke softly in Spanish, words Maria's mother had taught her in childhood. "Está bien, mija. You're safe here. Let me help you." The tenderness in that voice, the careful touch, it shattered Maria's defenses. When Elena set her dislocated shoulder with one swift, practiced motion, Maria finally let herself cry. Not from pain, but from the sudden, overwhelming kindness of a stranger who saw her suffering and chose to ease it. "There now," Elena murmured, binding Maria's shoulder with clean cloth. "Rest. I'll bring you tea." Through the thin walls, Maria heard voices, Brent and Roberto speaking in low tones on the porch. She couldn't help but listen, her fevered mind latching on to Brent's words. "I should have done something back then," Brent was saying, his voice raw with old shame. 5 years ago, when the soldiers drove those families from the canyon. I watched them burn homes, drag away children. And I just stood there. Told myself it wasn't my business, wasn't my fight. Roberto's reply came quiet but firm. "And now? Now I can't stand aside. Not again. Maybe it's too late for my soul, but at least this time I chose right. Redemption is a heavy burden, amigo. Heavier than regret." Brent's laugh held no humor. "I'll carry whatever weight I must. She deserves better than what this frontier's given her." Maria closed her eyes, Elena's cool cloth on her forehead, those words echoing in her fevered mind. He wasn't just saving her, he was saving himself. Trying to make right what he'd once made wrong. It didn't erase his past silence, didn't absolve him of standing by while others suffered. But it meant his mercy came from understanding, from lived regret, from the kind of moral reckoning that only comes when a man finally sees his own complicity. Elena returned with tea that smelled of chamomile and something else, something that eased the fire in Maria's blood. "Drink, mija. Sleep now. You're safe in this house." And for the first time since the flames consumed her village, Maria believed it. For days at the homestead had healed Maria's shoulder and quieted her fever, but they'd created a different kind of wound, one she couldn't bind with cloth or soothe with Elena's herbs. She'd grown comfortable here. Safe. She laughed at Roberto's stories, helped Elena with the garden, and found herself watching for Brent when he came back from checking the trails each evening. That comfort terrified her. She stood at the edge of the property as dawn broke, staring toward the distant mountains where her people had fled. Her mother was out there somewhere, lost, maybe captured, maybe dead. Her village was ash. Her brother's fate remained unknown. And here she was, eating warm tortillas and sleeping in a clean bed, protected by a white man who'd made her into a lie she was starting to believe. "You're up early." Brent's voice startled her. He approached with 2 cups of coffee, offering one without presumption. She took it, the warmth seeping into her palms. "I should go," she said, the words tasting like betrayal. "Find my people." "You should." He sipped his coffee, his gaze following hers to the mountains. "Trail's clear. I'll give you supplies, point you in the right direction." His easy agreement ignited something hot and jagged in her chest. "Just like that? You save me, drag me across the territory, make me your pretend wife, and now you'll just let me walk away? You were never my prisoner, Maria. I told you that from the start. Then what am I?" The words exploded out of her, all her confusion and shame and fear channeled into anger. "Your project. Your redemption. You think saving one Apache woman erases what your people did to mine? You think you can tame me with kindness, make me forget? Tame you?" Brent's voice went quiet and hard. He set down his cup with deliberate care. "That what you think this is? What else could it be? White men don't risk their lives for nothing. You want something from me, even if you won't admit it yet. They all do." For a long moment, Brent just looked at her, something painful working behind his eyes. Then he turned and walked back to the house. Maria stood frozen, her heart hammering, unsure if she'd won or lost. When he returned, he carried a pack filled with supplies, food, water, blankets, the knife he'd given her that first night. "Apache territories are northeast," he said, his voice stripped of emotion. 3 days on foot if you push hard. Stay off the main trails. There's cavalry patrols looking for stragglers." He held out the pack. "Take it. You're free to go. You always were." Maria stared at the offered pack, at his weathered face that revealed nothing now. "That's it? You'll just—" "I'm not keeping you, Maria. I never was." His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. "You want to believe I saved you for some twisted reason, that's your right. But the truth is simpler and sadder than that. I saved you because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. That's all. No grand plan, no hidden agenda. Just a man trying to do one decent thing in a world full of cruelty." He set the pack at her feet and turned away. "Doors always open if you change your mind. But I won't chase you. Won't beg. Your life is yours, Maria. It always should have been." He walked back toward the house, his shoulders set, leaving her standing there with the pack and the dawn and the terrible, crushing weight of choice. She could go. Right now. Find her people, search for her mother, reclaim the life that had been stolen from her. It's what she should do. What her people would expect. But her feet wouldn't move. Because somewhere between the mob's rope and this quiet morning, something had shifted. Brent hadn't tamed her, he'd given her space to be untamed. Hadn't tried to own her, he'd insisted she own herself. And that gift, that radical respect for her autonomy, had done what force never could. It had made her want to stay. Maria picked up the pack, her hands shaking. Then she walked toward the house, toward the man who'd given her freedom by refusing to take it. When she appeared in the doorway, Brent looked up from the table, surprise flickering across his face. "I'm staying," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "Not because you saved me. Not because I owe you. But because I choose to." Understanding dawned in his eyes, the difference between staying because she had to and staying because she wanted to. "Okay," he said simply. "Okay." They'd left Roberto and Elena's homestead 2 days prior, heading west toward territory Brent knew, rough country where a man could disappear if he was careful. The abandoned settlement appeared at dusk, a ghost town of weathered buildings left by miners who chased silver and found only dust. Brent chose the old assay office for shelter, its stone walls still solid despite the collapsed roof on one end. Maria was checking the back exit when she heard the horses. Not the random sound of travelers, but the deliberate approach of men who knew exactly where they were going. She moved to the window, and her blood went cold. 6 riders, all armed, and at their head sat Jacob Thornton on a big roan gelding, his thick frame silhouetted against the dying light. Brent. She didn't need to say more. He was beside her in seconds, his rifle already in hand. One look at the approaching riders and his jaw tightened. Thornton. Should have known he wouldn't let it go. "You know a man named Brent Moyer?" Thornton's voice carried across the settlement, loud and mocking. "Used to ride with decent folk before he turned traitor. Before he threw his lot in with Apache trash." Brent's hand found Maria's arm, squeezing once, a warning to stay back. Then he stepped into the doorway, his rifle lowered but ready. "That's far enough, Jacob. Far enough." Thornton laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "You got some nerve, Moyer. Drawing down on your own kind, helping that savage escape justice, making me look like a fool in front of the whole territory." He spat into the dirt. "You know what that cost me? Men I've worked with for years won't meet my eyes. My own boss questioned my judgment. Maybe you should have used better judgment. She didn't kill Tommy. Don't matter if she did or didn't." Thornton's face flushed red even in the fading light. "What matters is you humiliated me. Made me back down in front of everyone. And then you ran off with her like some lovesick fool." He leaned forward in his saddle. "I've been tracking you for days, Moyer. Paid good money for information. Called in favors. All so I could look you in the eye when I take back what's mine. She's not yours. She's not anybody's. She's a dead woman the second I get my hands on her. And you?" Thornton's smile turned cruel. "You're a traitor. Law says that's a hanging offense." The hired guns spread out, flanking the building. Professional movements, men who'd done this before. Maria counted them, calculated angles, felt the weight of the knife at her belt. 6 against 2, and only Brent had a rifle. The math was brutal. "Here's what's going to happen," Thornton continued, his voice taking on the false reasonableness of a man who'd already won. "You're going to send that Apache bitch out here. She's going to get what she deserves. And then you and I are going to settle this like men, unless you want to keep hiding behind her skirts." "I'm not hiding behind anyone." Brent's voice stayed level, but Maria could see the tension coiling through his shoulders. "And I'm not handing her over. You want her, you'll have to come through me. That what you want?" To die for some savage you've known what, a week. 2. Thornton shook his head in mock sorrow. Your daddy was a good man, Moyer. He'd be ashamed to see what you've become. My father taught me right from wrong. That's more than yours ever did for you. The words hung in the air like a match near powder. Thornton's face went from red to purple. Last chance. Send her out, or we come in shooting. Then come ahead. Thornton's hand moved toward his holster, and the world held its breath. The sun had dropped below the horizon now, painting everything in shades of blood and shadow. 6 men against 2, pride and vengeance against conscience and mercy. Maria moved beside Brent in the doorway, her knife drawn, her decision made. You don't have to, Brent started. I know. She met his eyes. But I choose to. Thornton saw her standing there and smiled. There she is. The cause of all this trouble. He drew his revolver with theatrical slowness. Boys, light it up. The first gunshot shattered the twilight, and everything exploded into chaos and fire. Bullets tore through the doorframe, forcing Brent and Maria back into the stone building. Glass shattered as gunfire raked the windows. Then came the smell, kerosene. One of Thornton's men had circled to the side, and now flames licked up the weathered wooden walls with hungry purpose. They're burning us out. Maria pressed herself against the stone, smoke already beginning to curl along the ceiling. The fire spread with terrifying speed, fed by dry timber and decades of abandonment. Within minutes, the entire back half of the building was engulfed. Brent grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the front room where a single horse, Thornton's gift of cruel mercy, stood tethered near what remained of the stable wall. The horse. Take it and ride hard north. There's a canyon about 2 miles out, lose them in the rocks. Maria stared at him through the thickening smoke. 1 horse. 1 chance. The math was simple and terrible. What about you? I'll hold them here, give you time. No, the word came out fierce and final. Maria's hand found his, gripping hard. We go together or not at all. Maria, don't be foolish. I'm not being foolish. I'm making a choice. Her eyes locked with his, smoke tears streaming down her face. You gave me freedom. Now I'm choosing what to do with it. Brent's expression cracked, showing the raw fear beneath his stoic mask. Not fear for himself, but for her. Then understanding dawned, she wasn't asking permission, wasn't seeking his approval. She was stating a fact. They would stand together. All right. He squeezed her hand once, hard. Then we fight. The flames roared now, consuming the back rooms, heat building like a furnace. Smoke choked the air, making every breath a battle. Outside, Thornton's men waited, guns trained on the exits, confident the fire would drive their prey into the open. But Maria saw what they didn't, the building's layout, the way the fire was being pulled by the draft from the broken windows, creating a wind tunnel of flame and heat. She'd seen this before when soldiers burned her village. Understood how fire breathed and moved. The front windows, she said urgently. Board them shut. Force the fire to the front door. Brent caught on immediately. They worked frantically, using broken furniture and fallen beams to seal the windows, channeling the fire's fury toward the single exit. The heat became unbearable, searing their lungs, blistering their skin. Maria's vision swam, her shoulder screaming where the old injury pulled. But she kept working, kept moving. "Now!" Brent shouted. They kicked open the front door. The backdraft exploded outward in a roaring wall of flame and superheated air. Thornton's men, positioned close to finish them, scattered in panic as fire engulfed them. Screams split the night as clothing ignited, horses bolted. In the chaos and confusion, Maria and Brent moved as one, mounting the horse together, her arms around his waist as he kicked the animal into a gallop straight through the wall of flame. Gunfire followed them, wild and panicked. A bullet grazed the horse's flank, another whispered past Maria's ear. But they were through, thundering into the darkness beyond the burning settlement. Behind them, Thornton's curses mixed with the roar of the inferno, his pride consumed by the same fire he'd intended for them. They rode hard for an hour before Brent finally slowed, both of them coughing smoke from their lungs, their clothes singed and smoking. When the horse stopped at a creek, they slid off together, collapsing on the bank. Maria's hands shook, adrenaline still flooding her system. She'd had a chance to escape, to take the horse and save herself. Every survival instinct had screamed at her to do exactly that. Instead, she'd chosen him. Chosen to stand and fight rather than run alone. Brent looked at her across the darkness, his face blackened with soot, his eyes reflecting moonlight and something deeper, gratitude, respect, and the bone-deep recognition of a bond forged in fire. "You could have left. I could have." Maria met his gaze steadily, her voice raw from smoke but certain. "I didn't want to." And in that moment, everything changed. Not rescuer and rescued. Not captor and captive. Not even husband and wife bound by a lie. Just two people who'd looked death in the face and chosen each other, freely, fiercely, without hesitation. The frontier stretched before them, dangerous and uncertain. But they would face it together, partners bound by something stronger than rope or law or blood. They'd earned each other in fire, and nothing would burn that away. Dawn broke over territory neither of them had seen before, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. They'd ridden through the night, putting distance between themselves and Thornton's fury, and now sat on a ridge overlooking an endless expanse of sage and stone that stretched toward distant purple mountains. Maria's shoulder ached, her throat still burned from smoke, and exhaustion pulled at every muscle. But she felt more alive than she had since the flames consumed her village. She'd survived. Not by running, not by hiding, but by choosing to stand with someone who'd proven himself worthy of that choice. Brent passed her the canteen, and she drank, watching the sun climb. Behind them lay everything they'd been, him a cowboy who'd looked away from injustice too many times, her a woman who'd learned to trust no one. Ahead lay everything they might become. "We're both wanted now," Brent said quietly, his gaze on the horizon. "Thornton will have every lawman and bounty hunter from here to California looking for us. Can't go back to anything we knew before." "I had nothing to go back to." Maria's voice carried no self-pity, only statement of fact. "My village is ash. My people scattered." She paused, her throat tightening. "But my mother, if she's alive, she'll have gone north with the others. To the reservation, or maybe beyond it to the old places in the high country. Then we'll search for her." No hesitation, no question in his voice. Just simple commitment. Maria turned to look at him, this weathered cowboy who'd thrown away his entire life for a stranger, who'd stood in fire rather than abandon her, who now offered to help her find what remained of her family without asking anything in return. Why would you do that? You've lost everything already because of me. Haven't lost everything. His eyes met hers, clear and steady in the morning light. Found something I didn't know I was looking for. The words hung between them, simple and profound. Not a declaration of love, it was too soon, too complicated for that. But an acknowledgement of what they'd become to each other. Partners. Companions. Two people who'd chosen each other when the world had given them every reason not to. The frontier's big, Maria said, her gaze returning to the vast landscape before them. Dangerous. Full of men who want us dead or captured. Sounds about right. Brent almost smiled. But we've got each other's backs. That counts for something. It counted for everything. Maria had spent her life believing that trust was a trap, that mercy from white men was a myth designed to lure and destroy. Then this man had proven her wrong, not with words, but with deeds. With choices made in fire and blood. With the simple, radical act of seeing her humanity and honoring it even when it cost him everything. She stood, her body protesting but obeying. Brent rose beside her, and together they walked to the horse. No longer rescuer and rescued. No longer captor and captive. Not husband and wife, though they still carried that lie for protection. Something harder to name but infinitely more precious, two souls who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk into the light together. My mother used to say the horizon is where earth makes promises to sky, Maria said as they mounted. Sometimes they're kept, sometimes broken. But the promise itself is always beautiful. Brent settled her in front of him this time, his arms around her as he took the reins. What promise do you see? Maria looked out at the endless frontier, dangerous, beautiful, uncertain. Behind them lay ash and death and everything they'd lost. Ahead lay the search for her mother, for her people, for some kind of future neither of them could yet imagine. But they would face it together, these two unlikely companions bound by fire and forged in trust. That we'll write our own story, she said. Not the one they tried to give us. Brent's arms tightened slightly, not restraining but embracing. Then let's ride. They moved down the ridge toward the rising sun, toward whatever waited in that vast and beautiful uncertainty. Two outcasts, two survivors, two people who'd learned that freedom isn't the absence of bonds but the presence of bonds chosen freely and honored faithfully. The frontier stretched before them, wild and unforgiving. But they would face it as they'd faced everything else, together, as equals, as partners who'd earned each other in fire. The horizon kept its promise. And so would they.